operational in mid-May, that weather conditions have forced the pier to be detached from the Gaza coast. Well, officials in Kenya are preparing for more protests despite the president's withdrawal of controversial plans to raise taxes. Kenya's defense minister says the army will stay on the streets until calm is restored following a week of unrest and political turmoil. But human rights groups warn that using force could worsen the situation on the ground. At least 23 protesters were killed at the peak of the demonstrations on Tuesday when activists broke into the Parliament building and set part of it on fire. Lawyers estimate that an intelligence police unit abducted 35 people suspected of leading the protests. On Wednesday, President William Ruto said all of them had been released, but rights groups say that at least 10 activists are still reportedly missing. The BBC is working to verify those reports. For more, I spoke to Ernest Cornell, the Kenya Human Rights Commission, about what it's been like in Nairobi. Now, I understand that you were on the front lines covering these protests and the government response. Can you first of all just tell us, what did you personally witness?
So what I witnessed was a large number of young Kenyans coming out on the street to protest the high taxes that were proposed in the Finance Bill of 2024. What I witnessed on the street was police using live ammunition to take out peaceful protesters who are asking the government, who are asking their MPs and the president to reject the bill. I witnessed police shooting 5 protesters outside Parliament, and 2 of them died instantly. One of the person who was shot dead had his head blast off. Another one was hit and he died on the spot. The 3 that I witnessed getting shot were, the other 3 were put on an ambulance and rushed to the hospital. These young protesters were chanting anti-finance bill slogans all through the Nairobi streets. I witnessed police tossing tear gas to them, using water cannons to try and disperse them, and also in some instances firing stun grenades. These groups were largely peaceful, and this peace was momentarily interfered when police started using force.
Given what you've just described there, what does your organization make of the government response, and what are you asking or calling on the government to do now?
What we are asking is for accountability. A life of a human being cannot be lost without an accountability. Whoever pulled that trigger must be held accountable. And it is not that only that person who pulled the trigger must be held accountable. Also, their bosses, the command where that order came from, that person must be held accountable.
We've also been hearing reports that the BBC is working to independently verify that there have been abductions in Kenya as well surrounding these protests allegedly carried out by a police unit. Can you tell us anything more about that?
Yeah, so what appeared to be happening is that security forces in Kenya were surrounding up people that they thought were influential in mobilizing for this protest. These were mostly people who have huge following in their online presence, either on X or TikTok. So ahead of the demonstration on Tuesday, most of them were abducted, and by the time they were released, the demonstration had already taken place. This was contrary to the law, because the law says that if someone is arrested for justifiable grounds, they need to be produced before a court of law within 24 hours. But there are instances where people were arrested and were not produced in court for the next 24 hours, only later to be released without any charge. We think and we believe that these were intimidation tactics so that they could not effectively mobilize people to come out on the street and protest the punitive taxes that were contained in the finance bill.
A Kenyan government spokesperson has said, quote, criminal elements who wanted a coup d'etat used these peaceful protests to their advantage. We do know that protesters stormed the Parliament building. Part of it was set on fire. There were several lawmakers that reportedly ran to safety in an underground tunnel. Given all of that, could it be argued that the use of force during these demonstrations was justified?
No, at no point was the use of force justified, and when that government spokesperson say that there was a coup d'etat, I don't know whether that was the case. using force against an armed protester is just unacceptable. Yes, there were pockets of violence, and there are reports that these largely peaceful demonstrations that were led by young Kenyans could have been infiltrated by people who had ulterior motive. But then police are trained to control such kind of a crowd. So at no point are they then allowed to use force to an extent that they are eliminating someone's lives.
Ernest, I just want to talk about what comes next here. We've heard that President Ruto has pledged to withdraw this controversial finance bill. Do you think that that might satisfy this protest movement?
Taxes on the punitive finance bill was just one aspect. People are complaining about bad governance. People are complaining about corruption. People are complaining about bloated wage bill in government. People are complaining about wastefulness. People are complaining that the promises that were made in 2022 are not being met. So that is just one aspect of it, and I'm sure people will keep agitating for more.
Here's a check now on some other stories making headlines at this